If you're here in the US, there's a very good chance that your most recent smartphone purchase was an iPhone. That's because Apple absolutely dominates the US smartphone market. In fact, at one point, they had over 50% market share. Even though it's fallen a bit since then, they still have about 47% of the market as of 2021, and this has been going on for years. But things are finally starting to change. According to some new data, the US might be shifting away from their iPhone loyalty. This could mean some big changes for Apple. So let's talk about what's going on. Thanks for watching till the end. If you'd like to see more videos like this, hit that sub button and leave a comment down below. And if you know someone who might find this video interesting, go ahead and send them a message or share the video with them. So let's start off by talking about just how dominant Apple is in the US smartphone market. As I mentioned, they currently have around 47% of the market, which means that nearly half of all phones sold in the US are iPhones. This is obviously a massive lead over Android manufacturers. Samsung is the next closest, but they only have about 23% of the market. And when you combine Samsung and Apple, that means that over 70% of all phones sold in the US are either iPhones or Samsung phones. This dominance has been going on for a while. As recently as 2016, Apple had over 50% market share. That means that for almost a decade now, Apple has been selling way more phones than any other manufacturer in the US, and this has led many to believe that Apple basically owns the US smartphone market. But that might not be the case for much longer, because things are finally starting to change. And according to some new data from Counterpoint Research, Apple actually lost their #1 spot in June. Now, this might not sound too surprising, considering that the iPhone 14 didn't come out until September. So Apple would likely lose a bit of momentum coming into June, but things turned out way differently than expected. Instead of having a slight decline, Apple actually saw a huge drop. They went from 41% market share in May to 29% market share in June. And this means that they completely fell out of the top spot for the first time in years. Now, you might be thinking, well, they were probably just low because the iPhone 14 hadn't launched yet. But that's not really the case. Even if we take a look at the rolling 12-month total, you can see that they fall into second place with 40% market share. Meanwhile, Samsung reclaimed the #1 spot with 41% market share. But there's even worse news for Apple. If we take a look at smartphone sales in the US, you can see that sales are down across the board. Apple, Samsung, and everyone else is seeing a decrease in sales. But once again, Apple is the worst of all. Their sales dropped by over 20%. That is the biggest dropout of all manufacturers. Samsung wasn't far behind them, though. They also saw a pretty big drop, with over a 10% decline. So why are smartphone sales dropping so hard? Well, there's a few reasons. First of all, smartphones have gotten really expensive lately. The average selling price of a phone has gone up significantly over the past few years, and this is especially true for iPhones. The iPhone 14 Pro starts at $999, and the iPhone 14 Pro Max starts at $1,099. That is a massive amount to charge for a phone, especially when you consider that Android flagships like the Galaxy S23 Ultra start at $1,199, and for about the same price. You'll get 4 cameras instead of 3, a built-in S Pen, and a bigger battery. So it's no wonder people aren't buying these phones. In addition to that, the global chip shortage has been hurting the tech industry for a while now, and that has led to lower production rates and higher prices. And when you combine that with the overall economic situation, you get a perfect storm for lower sales. People just don't have as much money to spend on luxury items like smartphones right now. And this is especially true for the US consumers who are facing record high inflation. All of this has been happening for a while now, but it seems to be getting worse as time goes on. Just a few days ago, Intel issued a warning that demand for tech products is going to continue falling. And the CEO said that consumer spending is the weakest. He's seen it in 20 years. So it doesn't really look like the smartphone industry will be recovering anytime soon. And that is bad news for Apple. For the first time in years, they're not going to be dominating the market. In fact, they might be in for a rough ride moving forward. That's because Android manufacturers are coming out swinging. While Apple has been busy jacking up their prices, Android manufacturers have been trying to provide consumers with some value. They've been offering more features for less money, and that seems to be paying off. Samsung, in particular, has been killing it lately. The Galaxy S23 series was a huge success, and it looks like the Galaxy Z Fold 5 is already going to be another banger. Samsung is continuing to innovate with their foldables, and unlike Apple, they're not afraid to experiment. They're willing to try new things and take risks. That seems to be paying off, because they're gaining ground on Apple faster than ever before. Not only are they taking back the one spot in terms of market share, but they're also winning with the foldable phones. Just a few months ago, reports surfaced that Apple was considering making a foldable iPhone. And that made a lot of sense. It seemed like the obvious move for Apple to stay competitive, but then nothing happened. And now it looks like they might be shelving the project indefinitely. A new report from Bloomberg says that Apple has canceled their plans to make a foldable iPhone, and that they won't be releasing it until 2025 at the earliest. And this is a huge mistake for Apple. They're giving up on an entire product category that could be worth billions of dollars. And the reason that they're doing this seems to be because of cost. Apparently, Apple thinks that foldable displays are too expensive, and they do want to cannibalize their normal iPhone sales. But this is short-sighted because Apple isn't really addressing the real issue. It's not the display that makes the iPhone expensive. It's the fact that Apple keeps jacking up their prices every year. And if they want to stay competitive, they need to address that. Right now, consumers have plenty of options when it comes to smartphones. There are phones for every budget and use case, and it's never been easier to switch carriers or even switch to a different operating system. And this is great for consumers, but it's not so great for Apple, because it means that they can't just rely on their brand loyalty to carry them forever. They actually need to start competing based on price and features. Otherwise, they could lose their grip on the US smartphone market. Looking back at the history of Apple, though, I wouldn't count them out just yet. Steve Jobs famously pulled the Mac out of the 1990s dumpster and turned it into one of the most iconic computers of all time. And Tim Cook has done the same thing with the iPhone multiple times. Every time it seemed like the iPhone was dead, Tim Cook managed to pull something out of his sleeve and save the day. So maybe he does it once again. But if he wants to do that, he needs to start focusing on what really matters, giving consumers what they want. As long as Apple keeps jacking up prices and failing to innovate, they're going to keep losing market share. So it'll be interesting to see what moves Apple makes next. They try to fight back and compete, or do they just give up and focus on the high-end market? Let me know your thoughts down below. That's it. Thanks for watching. Until next time.